Hello and welcome to this Managed Methods guide. Today we'll be discussing how to ensure alerts are going to the correct people and some examples of policy configuration. Be aware all policy violations will be batched out and sent every 4 hours to the people listed in the Notify Admin on Policy Violations section, specifically under the email section here. Additional users can be listed in this section, comma separated, who you want to have those email alert notifications sent to. You can also have singular users be assigned to specific policies in question or multiple users there as well, and that will allow those users to receive the notifications on just those singular policies you've selected rather than all of the violations emails there. Again, the Policy Violations tab is going to go ahead and keep a record of the various violations of any of the policies that have happened, and that can be a helpful way to go ahead and investigate and take a look at specific violations of any of the policies. But those direct notifications will have to either be implemented there at the top with the Notify Admin on Policy Violation, or for specific users here, again, with that Send Email to button there. So let's talk about some examples of some various policy configurations here. So to start off with, we'll talk about content policies here. Content policies are going to cover anything within Drive files, email, shared drive, Google Chat, as well as Google Classroom announcements. So one of the example policies that we could go ahead and implement here would be a phishing policy. So with that, we just give this policy a name here. In this case, I'm just going to call it phishing in this case. And the policy configuration here will be relatively simple. We'll need to select a source type. This will be email, and then we'll go ahead and do phishing scan. So this will go ahead and alert us anytime Google Web Risk API or PhishTank finds a potential phishing URL within an email and will alert us about that. So that's the entire policy there. I can go ahead and click apply here. That policy will be at the very bottom, so I can either scroll to the bottom here or click the arrow here, and that will take me to the bottom here. And this is where I could set remediation. So I've got some different options for remediation. The most commonly used for phishing emails would be either to delete the email. That will delete it out of the domain entirely. The end user would no longer have access, and you would also no longer have access to that email. Of course, if you're running some sort of backup solution, it won't delete it out of that. You could also go ahead and quarantine the email. That'll go ahead and move it to the user's trash. It would still be retrievable by the user, but you could also take a look at it as well and then determine from there, okay, do we need to actually delete, fully delete this, or is it fine being in that user's trash? Delete and quarantine are the most common again, but you could also warn the end user if that felt appropriate as well. That will go ahead and send a warning message to that end user and let them know that they have some kind of email that contains, in this case, a potential phishing here. If we selected that warn user, we could set up a custom warning message for them to receive, but probably your safest bets would be either to delete the email in question or quarantine the email. And then, of course, you could choose to notify the end user. You could also notify the admin. That will send 2 notification emails, one letting you know that the policy was violated, and then one letting you know that the specific remediation action you set took place. So in this case, we'll just set it to none for right now and go ahead and click Save. So now that policy is good to go, and moving forward, every time a phishing URL does get sent into the domain or is being sent within the domain, maybe there's an in-domain user that has a compromised account or something, we'll be alerted about that. So next, let's talk about revoking shares between OUs. This is another policy that may make some sense for you. So in this case, we'll just call this revoking shares between OUs, much like that, and then we'll go ahead and in this case just select drive files. So we don't have to actually specify any kind of threats here, and we can take a look at just the specific sharing here. So maybe we're saying, okay, which OU is it originating from that I want to kind of prevent that sharing originating from. So maybe it's an issue where I'm having some student accounts or maybe some teacher accounts that are not sharing things correctly to some student accounts, or vice versa. Or maybe you have a different, you have a larger OU structure where you've got students separated out very finely, and maybe you want to make sure that the 8th grade students aren't sharing to any students in the high school, or whatever the case may be. Utilizing these fields will go ahead and allow you to kind of set that policy up. So if I go ahead and click apply here, again, this policy will now be at the bottom, and right now this policy is just basically saying, hey, if there's a drive file from the student to the student OU from the teacher OU, go ahead and alert me. But of course, I could take specific remediation action here. I could delete those files. I could quarantine those files. Again, that quarantine feature, removing access, breaking all the sharing permissions, moving it over to that cam_quarantine folder in the admin's My Drive. Probably the most common would be revoke share. That'll go ahead and break the shares between when those shares happen. So every time there was a teacher that tried to, in this case, share to a student, it'd go ahead and break that share continuously. And of course, I could notify the user. I could notify the admin. If I do notify the user, I could set up a custom warning message there as well to kind of explain, hey, why this policy was implemented. I could even delay the remediation if that made sense there. So in this case, I'll go ahead and just again set that to none. And then let's talk about how to set up a Google Chat policy. So in this case, maybe I'm concerned about toxicity within Google Chat. Of course, that toxicity ML risk, which is looking at a number of different things, from identity attacks, insults, obscene language, as well as potential threats. So in that case, I could call this Google Chat toxicity, and that could be my policy name there, and then I could go ahead and select a source. If I click Google Chat, you'll notice that the other ones get grayed out. Google Chat policies have to be their own separate policy here, and then you'll notice that risk is selected, and I'll need to input a specific risk. In this case, I'll do that toxicity risk ML there. Of course, I could customize that to look for only the chats within maybe my student OUs where I'm primarily concerned, or maybe I'm just concerned about everything and I want to be aware of all of those. So in this case, I could go ahead and click apply again, go to the bottom here. That's where my policy will then be sitting. And now I can go ahead and set maybe a specific remediation to warn the user. But generally speaking, with behavioral types of policies, you want to go ahead and just be alerted about that, so then you can involve the correct people or take a look at it and kind of determine from there, hey, what next actions make the most sense. Once you've made your changes, you can go ahead and click save there, and now your policies are good to go. All of the policies that do exist here, are fully customizable and editable. It's really up to you what kind of specific things you want the platform to look for. Those are a couple good examples. Another example might be, hey, I'm concerned about movie and video files. So I could go ahead and turn this policy on, and I could go ahead and edit it. Maybe I say 200 megabytes is pretty small. I want to up that to maybe 1,000, 2,000, whatever kind of makes the most sense, and then go ahead and take a look at it. I could also do things where it's only coming from the student OU as well. So maybe I'm just concerned about that student OU again is the primary one. Or maybe I'm having an issue with both OUs and I just want to monitor all of this and see, okay, do we have any very large files coming in? So very easy to go ahead and modify that policy. Or you could create your own policy looking for maybe in just one specific area. Maybe it's just in drive files you're the most concerned about. Really up to you on that, but those are some good examples of some various policies you can quickly roll out of the box there, or quickly create there, so you can kind of create some different alert notifications, or even have the platform take some specific remediation action on things. Okay, let's next talk about user policies and some potential user policies there. So these top two policies, the suspicious login policy and unapproved login policy, these are probably the most commonly utilized. They're going to be kind of your bread and butter policies for login activity. The first one's going to say, hey, if there's any suspicious activity from outside the United States, go ahead and alert me. You could set various remediation to suspend the user, reset the password. Be aware with resetting passwords here through the automatic remediation, that's going to go ahead and reset it to a random alphanumeric string, and you'll have to go ahead and rechange that password through the platform here, or through the Google Admin Console. You could also just go ahead and warn the end user as well. Really up to you on those. But these are great policies to have in place to kind of look for those outside the US logins. Of course, you can add additional countries. Very easy, for example, to add Mexico or Canada, if that makes sense. Really up to you on what countries should be on that approved list of countries there. You could add additional policies here, such as a total number of logins, distinct number of logins. One thing to be aware of is that that's going to look there generally every 4 hours. It can be delayed to where it doesn't look until every 48 hours. That's generally pretty uncommon, but could potentially happen there. So that's one thing to be aware of there for sure. So with this, you certainly could add additional policies if that made sense, but really up to you on that, what kind of makes the most sense on those. But let's go ahead and talk about how to add additional countries here, and take a look at that there. So if we go ahead and click the edit button here, this will go ahead and take us over into some areas where we can edit, and the very bottom here will be the approved countries list. So if we go ahead and click into here, I can add additional countries here. So for example, I could start typing in Canada. I could input Canada in there. I could input maybe Mexico, whatever made the most sense there. Very easy to go ahead and add additional countries there, and totally up to you on what makes the most sense on that. Next, let's go ahead and click back into policies here, and next let's talk about app policies. So again, with app policies, that's going to be any third-party application where the end users have granted some kind of OAuth token into an application. So there's a couple ways you could approach policies. It can be as simple as a specific application name, or as complicated as our abnormal email permission, where it's very granular and looking for very kind of specific things that are violating another kind of specific set of things. So let's start off with a policy just based on an app name. So if we come over here again to this app policy name, we can go ahead and input a specific app that maybe we're concerned about. Maybe in this case it's the shopping app Rakuten here. So maybe I'm just going to call this shopping, or maybe just Rakuten, whatever kind of makes the most sense. I could quickly go ahead and input that specific policy there and say, okay, yep, really, for us, they really shouldn't be, utilizing any kind of shopping applications, connected to our domain there. So let's go ahead and create that policy. I could have this usage kind of customized to a specific user group, OU, even just a specific user. But let's go ahead and just set this policy like it is. And now we have the Rakuten policy set up here, and I could go ahead and revoke access to it or warn the end users about it, whatever kind of makes the most sense there. For shopping apps, sometimes revoke access is the best policy. Maybe if it's more staff accounts, you do a warn user first and kind of start training the staff and say, hey, certain applications you should be utilizing your personal email, not your work email there. So that's another option as well with that. So now that policy right now will just notify me if any Rakuten cashback apps are detected here, but of course I could set that remediation. Next, let's talk about a little bit different kind of policy here. So another option with policy creation here is by app category. App category are kind of the larger categories of applications, so things like games, tools, personal apps, work, whatever the case may be. A lot of times there'll be a lot of third-party applications that kind of fall under that games category, which may just be a case of, hey, really not the best use or very productive for our student. Maybe students, generally speaking, are the ones that authorize games, and you could come in here and set a policy simple saying, okay, hey, if the platform detects any game apps, let's go ahead and revoke access to it. You could have it be, a little bit further complicated. You could say, okay, hey, if it's unsanctioned here and it's been a discovered app, so you've inputted that, it's already been discovered by the platform, and it's been sanctioned by me, let's go ahead and not have that policy apply. But to anything that I have not sanctioned as the end user, let's have that policy apply. So in this case, I could call this a games. I could call this games, or I could call this games policy, whatever makes the most sense to you. We'll just call it games in this case and go ahead and click apply here. So anytime there's a games application that's been unsanctioned here, I could go ahead and again either revoke access or warn those end users, whatever made the most sense there. Now policies can get a little bit more complicated as well through some various ways, and this complication can be very helpful if you're trying to kind of narrow things down and kind of get a little bit more granular with things. So with here, we could go ahead and look at scope categories and scope and app category here. So let's go ahead and start off with app category. So maybe it's a concern of, hey, there's a lot of applications I've noticed that have high level access into drive files here. So maybe I call this one abnormal permissions drive. So much like the one below it, and then I could come in here and say, okay, what kind of applications am I concerned about that might have this high level access that I'm not comfortable with? So maybe it's like games. Maybe I say, personal's fine. Maybe I go, hey, photos is not one I'm super concerned about, but search tools not really work. But maybe dating I don't think should have any legitimate business having access. News and magazines. Maybe I go maps and navigation. Don't really understand why that would need that. I might leave Android aware alone. I could say, could debate on the medical one. Communication I could determine. Comics doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Leave alone products. Books and reference. That's one you could kind of think about and determine, hey, what kind of makes the most sense there? Am I seeing ones where they kind of have that? Need to have that access level, and then why? Maybe you just say for now, let's go ahead and be safe here. Maybe I go art and design as well, auto and vehicles, shopping. Maybe I say health and fitness doesn't really need to either. Weather. Maybe I say, hey, parenting, that's not something we want to do. Again, up to you on some of these app categories. Maybe go house and home isn't one. Music and audio, maybe that's one I kind of think about and say, what, not right now, but maybe later I come back and add that in here. I could do travel and local. I could do events. Video players and editors, I could certainly kind of debate on that one. Maybe we're utilizing kind of some kind of video editing, software throughout our domain here that we purchased. Maybe we leave that on, or maybe I don't have anything like that and I can go ahead and add that in there. I can add libraries and demos, beauty, lifestyle, entertainment in here, sports, social, food and drink, explicit here, as well as VPN. I could think about unknown. Sometimes unknown will capture applications that you have generated as as the end user or something like that as well. So totally up to you on that. But then if you kind of click off here, now these various app categories is what the policy is going to look for. So any applications that fall under these various categories is what the policy is directly going to apply to. And then next I could come in here and say, okay, I'm looking for various narrow scopes. I want to make this policy narrow and look for only specific things. So here I typed in drive, and now all the various specific scope permissions for drive popped up here. So I could say, hey, maybe I don't want them to be able to view and manage the files in drive. I'll type in drive again here, and maybe I say I am concerned about maybe the metadata as well. Type in drive again. Maybe I say I don't really want them managing anybody's spreadsheets either. And I could type in drive again here. Maybe I say view your Google apps. Maybe that's not something I'm concerned about, but maybe view the files in your Google Drive is one I am concerned about there. So this one is one I could debate and say, hey, maybe is there any applications that need to have that level of access here into this app category? Maybe I determine no, and I add that in there, that one in there as well. Where this is looking at, hey, view and manage the Google Drive files and folders that have opened or been created by with this specific application in question. If I then type in Drive again here, I could go ahead and say maybe I don't want them to be managing the forms of my end users either, and maybe I also don't want any managing of metadata. So this is a very, very kind of strict set of scopes here. I'm kind of grabbing a lot of the high-level access into various elements of Drive here. I could say, hey, maybe there's some applications that do fall under these categories and I want to make sure it doesn't apply to, so I'd go ahead and click discovered, hey, if any applications already exist that fall under these that I've already sanctioned, let's go ahead and not have the policy apply to that. So I could go ahead and click apply here. So again, now that policy will be at the very bottom here, and I could choose to set some kind of remediation here and determine kind of what makes the most sense there. I could revoke access, so then every time an end user tries to authorize this application, it'll kick them back out over and over again. And I could also go ahead and choose to just warn the end user as well, if that makes sense. So really kind of up to you what makes the most sense on those specific kind of policies. But those are some good examples of how you can kind of take a look at various policies and kind of determine, hey, what makes the most sense as we look at policies under the apps here. So that's kind of the high-level overview of some various elements of taking a look at policies and understanding how to ensure that the correct people are getting those email notifications when a policy is violated there. I hope this guide was helpful, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to our support team, support@managedmethods.com, or your customer service representative.